Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to COASTER-net Update. We've got some breaking news for you out of Sandusky, Ohio, where supposedly there are even more markings around the antique cars area. Now, Danny, this has been an area of discussion for both of us, also on CP Unlimited. Me and Steven also discussed this area at length at different times. So being that there are more markings now in this area, I think this might be an area that could see some expansion, specifically in terms of a roller coaster. But Danny, before we get into what they could possibly be putting here, I think we need to set parameters for what expectations we should have with a new coaster here. And what
we need to do what we did with our 5-year plan shows, right? We need to sort of establish some rules, such as the things that they definitely will do, things that they definitely will not do, and things that they could do, right?
Yeah.
So we're gonna establish 2 or 3 rules here that I think we're going to live or die by here.
Well, first, I think we have to say that antique cars is DOA, that all of the markings have been kind of centered around this area. Antique cars also is one of the first rides that they usually don't open, like say on like a Halloween Weekends Friday, or if there's not enough staff in the park. Like the antique cars back there, that ride sometimes has been down for the entire haunt season because they've used it for haunt before. For the old skeleton key rooms, a few years back, they had, one of their haunts on the track out there. Plus, you also have an antique cars at the front of the park over by the greatest roller coaster in the world, Raptor. There is one right next to there.
Wait. Steel Vengeance is at the front of the park.
Oh, sorry. So
there's Voyage, actually.
It's kind of superfluous at this point to have an antique cars in the back and an antique cars in the front. Now, I'm not saying that the antique cars in the back isn't picturesque. I'm not saying it's not a nice ride. I'm just saying that this is a whole lot of land in that back of the park. And the park officials, especially Jason McClure, has said that we need to keep an eye on Frontierland because Frontierland is going to be getting a whole lot of expansion. The question is Steel Vengeance and Forbidden Frontier the end of that expansion, or are there still more things to come? So I think that's the first ground rule to set here.
Yeah, I think that's absolutely a good idea based on what we've seen, and that's a good first rule, especially now that we've got some markings there. And we've in our 5-year plan, we discussed the possibility of those antique cars being removed in favor of maybe a small wood coaster just in that plot. Like a little gravity group, more of a family type coaster. But perhaps there's something bigger, which is going to lead us to our second rule that we sort of had some back and forth about this.
Well, at first we said that they wouldn't remove 2 attractions, and I think there is
more than 2.
More than 2,
but there is one scenario where they could remove, say, 3.
Yeah, and I think the bottom line is they're not going to remove 2 coasters. So if you start looking at other rumors we've heard recently, the heavy rumor is Gemini's gone, and the problem that you get to with the antique cars and Gemini plot is to connect those 2 things together. That if you're going to get rid of antique cars and Gemini, you have to kind of do a little work. If you look on Google Earth, and it might behoove you at this point to pull up a map of Cedar Point and look at Google Earth to
It'd
really
be difficult, and it would be going over a lot of Midway.
You'd be going over a lot of Midway. You can do an L-shaped thing, but I think it gets a little tough. So that's the other rumor we've heard is Gemini is gone. So one of the natural options then is, well, if you get rid of Mine Ride and Gemini, well, then you can connect things a lot easier. But like we said, we just don't think they're going to remove 2 coasters in 1 year. I think it's unlikely, especially those 2 coasters, because there's a lot of shared parts involved. There would almost be silly to get rid of both of them at the same time, right?
Yeah, and that's something that I had brought up is that Mine Ride and Gemini, they might both be candidates for removal, but if they both have a lot of trains, they both have a lot of parts to offer, by a manufacturer that no longer exists. So certainly, removing one of those rides allows you to do a lot of cannibalization to help support the other for the foreseeable future. Now, there's two trains of thought. One is that Mine Ride is the smaller ride, arguably the less popular ride, arguably the lower capacity ride, and it takes up a nice plot of land with some land and some water, so you could have some interaction there if you really wanted to in a nice setting, and it's right smack in the middle of Frontier Town. The other train of thought is, well, Gemini takes up more land, is a flat plot of land. You wouldn't have to do as much ground prep and whatnot, would make demolition and construction probably quite a bit easier. But the argument against that also is, very high capacity ride. You have the ability to only run one side and still have the ride open on less busy days. And Gemini also has more of the record breaking aura to it. It's got a little bit more history, I think, in general, when it's more what Cedar Point is about. I think it's generally more iconic than Cedar Creek Mine Ride. Cedar Creek Mine Ride, though, is the family ride, right?
Yeah.
So you don't want to necessarily be removing all of your family rides. But you could argue Gemini is also a family ride. It's maybe one of the first bigger coasters. It's sort of a bigger version of Cedar Creek Mine Ride in many of the ways that we just discussed. But removing both of those would not seem to make much sense. So I think we can discuss options that involve removing either of those rides, but I don't think we're going to see anything that involves removing both of them at the same time.
So what we're going to do next is go through some theories we have and look at these different plots of land and say, well, what could we possibly do here with these plots of land? And we're going to go with most likely to least likely. And I think the first two are both even, maybe not even money that they're going to happen, because who knows. But I think the first one we looked at was the Antique Cars Mine Ride scenario. And if you look at this plot of land, these two rides or attractions are right next to each other. You could build a fairly significant wood coaster on this plot of land, I think. The question is, would you go over that midway? Would you cut off that midway? Because both of the entrances to the Antique Cars and the Mine Ride are just right across the street from one another. Oh, the other thing we do know, one other thing, Danny, is if you're looking at Google Earth, you will see that big white building right next to Snake River Falls, right next to Skyhawk. That is the Town Hall Museum. That is what they are renovating this year for the big 150th anniversary. So I would not expect that to go anywhere. So that I don't think that they're going to touch the Town Hall Museum. So that's
maybe our third parameter, is that does not go away.
Yeah. So I think that limits what you can do around that area. So when I'm talking of that midway and that whole, Old Town Square there, you could just have that be a dead end and force people to go past Maverick. And that's not an ideal route, because it gets real tight over by the Maverick entrance, right behind the Roundup food stand. So it gets real tight there. So I don't think that's an ideal thing, but you could also have people go underneath the structure. And that is not unheard of either, with wood coasters especially, and even steel coasters to some extent. You look at things like Gold Striker out in California, you go under the structure. At Knott's Berry Farm, to get to the park, if you park in the parking lot or the hotel, you have to walk under Ghost Rider. So it's not unheard of to walk underneath a wood structure. I just think traditionally they have tried to design around that if possible, though.
Right. Yeah. No, those are all good points.
So if you think about it, like a wood coaster, would be.
See, we talked about this for about an hour the other night, and now my wheels are spinning again.
I know that's the problem. Is you look at this area and you say wood coaster, but when you look at Mine Ride, Mine Ride, for being so tame in quotation marks, Mine Ride takes up a whole large plot of land. You're talking about it does, and you're talking about a huge area there where you could be talking wood coaster, you could be talking B&M flying coaster, you could be talking about a whole slew of things that are all exciting prospects, I think.
And you said that the splash zone from Shoot the Rapids, the rearmost splash area, is being used for the Frontier.
Yeah, so Forbidden Frontier now takes up most of the island inside of like the Millennium Island is what it was originally called. So Forbidden Frontier, there's a little portion of it, but I would also assume too that any little portions of that Millennium Island are also going to be used for the new Snake River boat ride, the old paddle wheel. So I'm assuming that that's pretty much going to be off limits. Anything on the island. So I'm looking at, you would be exclusively using the antique cars and the Mine Ride plot here. And I think you could get a good sized wood coaster in there. You could get a decent sized flying coaster that kind of, something like a Superman layout that kind of twists on itself, as opposed to like a flying dino that maybe goes out and back. But They did the whole Cedar Creek Mine Ride 50th anniversary. Maybe that was like the last hurrah there. I don't know. They did a few painting things on it, but it wasn't like they dropped a whole ton of money into it either. So
why does Rougarou have such a long queue? Side note.
It's funny, but when Mantis was around, Mantis sometimes filled up that queue. And I can recall, the first few years of Mantis and that queue being full. And if that queue was full, you just kept walking. There is no question about that decision.
Yeah, I honestly, if that queue's empty, you probably should keep walking.
And I'll tell you what, even more impressive than the Mantis queue was always the Mean Street queue. And that Mean Street queue took up most of that whole infield. They put a haunt there. They put other crap there. But back in the day, that was all a queue line. And I will admit, I was there a few weekends when that queue was full as well. So that's another one that's walking by. So what do you think on the wood coaster here? You think that's a good little plot of land?
Yeah, I think as far as wood coaster goes, I think you're talking. I think you're talking maybe GCI. I mean, there's a good relationship there. There's talk that Dorney Park is doing the Gravity Group thing. Who knows if that's still in the plans? Maybe they're looking at Gravity Group for something. With the last time we really talked about a Gravity Group wood coaster for Cedar Point, we were talking about a little one, and there was really nothing to go off of that said that there was any sort of relationship there, but it sounds like maybe there is now. RMC, obviously, there is an RMC relationship with the chain now. So honestly, I don't think you can rule anything out. My personal preference would still be, a big GCI like a Gold Striker, or, a Thunderhead, a Renegade, upsized, even maybe closer to the size of like a Wodan Timber Coaster.
Something bigger, something. I think if Cedar Point's, it's not record-breaking big, but something that's going to be on the bigger side, that's going to be more impressive than say other things like that are in the chain, like Prowler or Gold Striker or Mystic Timbers.
Something to fill the void that was left when Mean Streak was converted to Steel Vengeance. The big twister, compact, in and out of its own structure wood coaster that Mean Streak. That's one great thing. That's one thing that was always great about Mean Streak is it had the impressive looking structure. It was it was inside the own supports. the sensation of speed, even when you weren't going that fast, that sort of enhanced all of that. Those were all good things that Mean Streak did. That Mean Streak was never just overly comfortable or overly exciting as far as the ride itself goes. A big GCI along the size of, I think Wodan Timber Coaster, which is in the 130-foot tall range. That runs urethane wheels, so it's only about 3,400 feet long, but you could build something that's, 120, 130 feet tall, run steel wheels on, and easily get 4,000 feet of good GCI track out of it, and you're going to have one hell of a ride there. Wodan, Troy, something along that size.
Now, along those same lines, and I think this is a little less likely, it's just why I'm putting it second here, is you starting, of course, with the antique cars, and then maybe going over the Maverick Lagoon, and then getting into the Snake River Falls plot of land. So this would require, because Town Hall is right in the way there, so you can't just go antique cars to Snake River Falls. There's no direct route without interfering with Town Hall Museum, which we already said is one of our qualifications. They're probably not going to touch that. So you'd have to go around Town Hall, which requires you to possibly move Wave Swinger, and then probably go over the lagoon for Maverick, maybe even interacting with the Maverick turnaround there, and then going into the Snake River Falls plot. This still, I think you're talking wood coaster, but now you're talking about like an out and back wood coaster, something more along the lines of like what Mystic Timbers is, what Prowler is. And my concern is that I don't know if Cedar Point would want a wood coaster, or any coaster for that matter, to be interacting with Maverick. I know Europa does it, but I don't know if Cedar Point would do that here.
Well, would Cedar Point really copy Europa Park by having their launch coaster interacting with a GCI wood coaster and a water ride or whatever? I don't know that's all of a sudden
it's a little
Cedar
too
Point
on the nose, right?
Well, I mean, Cedar Point already stole the Thorpe Parks tagline when they brought out a place like no other. So,
so this one, it's just weird because. We have heard rumors of Snake River Falls being on its last leg as well. We see these shoot the chutes rides being pulled out at other parks, especially Cedar Fair parks. We see these things disappear.
They're only ever popular on the really, really hot sunny days.
Yeah, it's like people nowadays with phones and electronics, they just don't want to get soaking wet anymore, and they don't want to go through the rigmarole of having.
Well, and they don't want to sit down and eat lunch with their family while they're soaking wet either.
Absolutely not. Danny, we're not barbarians here. You don't eat when you're
wet. No, we're not at all.
It's just that should be one of the ground rules. You don't eat when you're wet. It's just come on. So that's why we put this one number 2. Now there is an option here. Okay, there is an option to go the other way and to do a U-shaped thing where you take the antique cars, Mine Ride, and Snake River Falls out. You don't go over the Maverick Lagoon, but you kind of go behind Skyhawk, and you make a U-shaped coaster. And this now, if you're going to do this, I think you are now talking B&M flying coaster. I would say surf coaster, but we don't know what a surf coaster is yet. We don't know.
Surf coaster could be something really dumb.
It could be really dumb. It could be the B&M version of Wicked Twister with a launch. You also have a launch right in with Maverick, so would you put another launch coaster right next to that? So that's and they've always wanted a flying coaster. I know Steven has always been like, oh, flying coaster. Tony Clark on occasion has talked about flying coasters. So it's always been that one.
Well, it's the one genre they've really. It's been the one genre that they've never had.
Yeah, they've always lacked that, and now. With Firehawk being gone, the whole state of Ohio lacks this as well. So there are no. What's the nearest flying coaster? Great America with Superman? Yeah, right. There's nothing else because like they have Great Adventure has Superman, Great America has Superman. Am I missing a flying coaster anywhere? There's not a whole lot of them.
No, I mean, Six Flags America has Batwing, Canada's Wonderland has Time Warp. Yeah, there's not a whole lot there. Yeah,
There's
I
not a
think
whole lot, so
Great America probably.
so a flying coaster here, plus you have the different stuff you could do. If you use the mine ride plot, you could go over the water. You could probably do other water features in the Snake River Falls plot. And you have a whole big plot of land there, a huge plot of land. You could probably do a lot of things there. And maybe even a T-Rex RMC coaster too would not be.
Or you replace it with now that they've done Copperhead Strike and there's some sort of relationship with Mach, there's always the possibility of doing like a supersized power splash or something along those lines.
Well, if you did that, I feel like if you did that, you would only use the Snake River Falls plot,
that's what I'm saying. You could take out Snake River Falls and do something else over there for get a water ride for a water ride.
Yeah, and yeah, but that would be so. So right now we're looking at 2022. I think that would be down.
That would be separate.
Yeah. So that's also the possibility. You start talking about the RMC T-Rex, which we don't know what that looks like yet. We don't know. We know it can go up high. We don't know. The RMC has basically said, oh, we can basically do anything. So we don't know really any upper limits. We also don't know what the back half looks like either. Is it hill-based like a B&M Hyper? Is it more like I-305 with twists and turns? No one really knows. So it's hard to conceptualize, but if you need a big plot of land, Antique Cars Mine Ride would fulfill that. But then if you add in Snake River Falls, you'd have even more land there, which would make it probably one of the bigger coasters in the park at that point. Right?
Yeah, I mean, and generally, I'm still leaning wood coaster, and I think that's why we put that at the most likely, right? Because wood coaster fits into FrontierTown. I mean, not having a wood coaster in FrontierTown just seems kind of weird. I mean, I know Steel Vengeance is still there, but not having a wood coaster in FrontierTown just seems a little bit off. The flying coaster, if you're going to make it part of FrontierTown, what theme do you go with? Because Cedar Fair has been doing some half-decent light theming on their more recent coasters, like Orion, Twisted Timbers, Steel Vengeance, Mystic Timbers even. So, what theme do you try to go with?
A flying coaster? Could you keep... Could you do like a fly-through and keep like a mine theme maybe? And try and do like a fly-through like over the water and then build like, fly through like a building?
I don't know. I don't know. You've made it painfully obvious that you don't agree that manta rays fly. So I don't know how you convince people that something that goes through a mine flies.
I don't know. A bird? You do the canary? Like,
that's 5.5 years of heckling right back in your face there.
Well, hey, it's a canary. Canaries are in mines, and it's the escape from the mine, and you're the canary. There you go.
So what, are you going to get hung upside down by your ankles halfway through?
I guess. I don't know. Well, no, that's the brake run. Come on. You are upside down, and you feel like you're dead.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, I don't know. Wood coaster seems so obvious that it's maybe too obvious.
Well, and
which is maybe the reason.
And we've also been talking about the wood coaster on the beach too. And a wood coaster on the beach would just fit more with the history of the park. But like you said, it could fit back here in Frontierland too. So it's very possible that
honestly, I feel like the flying coaster would be better fit on the beach.
Well, yeah, but if you look at what Fantasia
because if you think back to what Rob Decker said in the Gatekeeper from Dreams to Screams documentary, he talked about opening up views of the beach. Putting a wood coaster on the beach blocks off the beach because of the structure. So it sort of goes.
I got news for you. Ever since they pulled down Disaster Transport, I feel like the wind that cuts across the peninsula is so much more fierce that I think they need to close down part of the beach to cut off the wind, because I think it's negatively impacting the rest of the park. Where Gatekeeper that first few years, had a lot of, outages down to wind. That wind just cuts right across the whole peninsula now because there's nothing
Wind
really
seeker.
blocking it. That what?
Wind seeker.
Windseeker's down, but I'm also Gatekeeper was down the first few years due to wind too.
I don't know. That's an interesting one there.
But
I don't know.
With the flying coaster in FrontierTown, you look at what Phantasialand's doing with Fly, and doing like this experimental thing, and they always had on, the Professor Dilbert with the flying machine. Maybe an extension of that storyline. They've already done that with the Sky Coaster. Next to
well, that's what I was gonna say. The only way that they could make that work is doing something along those lines, where it's like an experimental flying machine. But I don't know. Does that really fit into FrontierTown?
I feel like that's been overdone in general.
Yeah. No, I would agree.
Like that whole storyline. I think you find that storyline at Silver Dollar City on almost all their rides, and then you find it with Phantasialand. So let's get crazy here. Okay, because
oh boy, we're not crazy already, Andy.
No, everyone's waiting for the 500-foot roller coaster, right? And I'm going to give you the way
you are
done, because this now pulls in the Gemini plot. So if you start, we're going to start where? We're going to start at Antique Cars, right? So we're going to go straight out, and if you go right next to Steel Vengeance, there's a maintenance building. And this is where like Rob Decker's office is. If you've ever been to Winter Chill Out, you go through tours of this place. It's pretty big. It's a storage facility, but they've been moving a lot of their stuff off site. That they've been buying up land in the city of Sandusky to be moving stuff like this off site. Now, I'm not saying it is this, but if you go straight out past that, and we were talking about using that old Sandcastle Suites area. But they keep adding more and more premium RV spots out there. So the rumor now is, I have not been back there recently. The rumor now is that most of the Sandcastle Suites area has now been taken up by premium RV spots. However, there are old RV spots right there in the middle of the two lighthouse points. So you could, in theory, still go out into the Soak City parking lot, into those RV spots, maybe take a few of those out. And
that's really hard to get back there, though. I mean, you got to go over a lot of stuff here. I'm looking.
Well, if you look at what you have to go over, you have to go over the one midway, which we're talking about doing that anyway with the Wood Coaster. So you're going to go over the one midway. You're going to go out past the maintenance building. Whether you go over the maintenance building like they do at other parks, sometimes they just go right over the maintenance building. Sometimes they change them. Or if you go straight out and then you come back and do like a T formation. So you have a straight line from Antique Cars out to, say, maybe the beginning of the old RV spots, come back, and then you make a T formation with Gemini. Now I think you're talking that you have enough space for your 500-foot standard coaster. Full circuit, 500-foot coaster. I'm not going to sit here and say who's going to make it. Is it an RMC T-Rex? I don't know. Is it a straight-up B&M? I don't know. But you have this T-like formation being formed here, starting in FrontierTown, going out into the Soak City parking lot somewhere, maybe further, and then down into Gemini. Maybe you don't even need to go that far. If you're using the whole Gemini plot, do you even need to go into the parking lot?
Probably not if you do the right layout. I mean, Gemini takes up a lot of land.
You could do an L-shaped layout like Leviathan and, Fury to some extent. You could do an L-shaped layout and build something right there too. I'm just saying, it's hard to conceptualize, once again, what a 500-foot lift hill would look like. Is it an elevator lift? Is it a standard lift? I don't know what that would look like and how much space you would need for that to go up. But if you were to use that whole area You're talking about a huge, like, you just going from the end of the antique cars out to that maintenance building. That's more than enough space for any size lift hill. And then it's what do you do after that? So that's my crazy talk there, Danny.
That is crazy talk. I mean, anything's possible. I mean, Cedar Point's done crazy stuff before, but
well, you just look at if you scroll down to where Millennium Force is, and you look at how much space Millennium Force that lift hill takes up, it's minuscule compared to what you would need. You'd probably need the antique car plot and maybe just a little bit more if you wanted to put Millennium Force over there. And now, obviously, when it does the big sweeping turns and stuff, now you're taking up more and more land. But if you have something that's tighter, I don't think we're going to see B&M and do these big elements. And that's where maybe the RMC T-Rex comes in. Maybe it's more like an I-305. Where it's more
it could be. I mean, I think that's certainly a possibility.
You know, because then you're doing a lot more stuff in a confined area as opposed to making these big sweeping hills. Because we kind of already have that. But then you can say, well, we have the tighter maneuvers with Maverick right next door too. So I don't know. And I'm just giving you where I think it would be. If I had to look at this map and where you could put a 500-foot roller coaster, I think there is clearly space here to do something like that, especially if the rumor is true and they are removing Gemini. I think absolutely that is true. And then it also improves your skyline too, because you got that Maverick first drop that's real little, but then anywhere you put this big 500-foot tall structure, it's gonna like be your background for Steel Vengeance and Maverick now. So it's gonna look nice.
Yeah, I can see it. I'm looking here. You could pull it off. It would require some creativity, but it could be done.
It can be done, and that's the thing. People are like, oh, they don't have space for this stuff anymore, and that's not altogether true. They have space. It's just what do you want to value with the space, and what do you want to do here? So right. Like we said, this is for 2022. Next year, they're already promoting next year being the big 150th celebration with the parade, with the boat ride, with all the other great festivities going on. So I would not expect to see anything next year. But if we already see markings now, I tend to lend to think, I kind of think that we're going to see something bigger on the bigger side here. That if we already see markings now in the antique cars plot, I think that means we're going to see something bigger come 2022. Because otherwise, why are they putting markings now, right?
Yeah, I mean, Steel Vengeance, they started working on 2 years ahead of time. So I think you're probably right.
So we will keep you updated here with all the latest on what's going on here. So as always, I am Andy Rybarczyk from Chicago, Illinois.
And I'm Danny Miller for myself from Binghamton, New York.
Right on, Warriors.
Thanks, guys. See you next time.